Commander Zektar adjusted his environmental suit as the transport ship shuddered through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b. The Galactic Defense Coalition had assembled forces from 12 different species to defend the strategic mining world from the Vorthak invasion. As a seasoned warrior from the Kalani Republic, Zektar had fought alongside many alien races, but today would mark his first mission with the newcomers everyone whispered about: humans. The humans had only joined the coalition 3 cycles ago, after their homeworld Earth had been discovered by a routine exploration fleet. Most species took decades to develop space-worthy military technology, but humans had somehow reverse-engineered coalition tech in mere months. Their rapid advancement had impressed the Council, though many questioned whether these bipedal mammals possessed the tactical discipline necessary for serious warfare. Zektar's 4 eyes studied the mission briefing on his tablet. The Vorthak had established a fortified position in the planet's northern canyon system, using their superior numbers to overwhelm the local defense forces. Intelligence suggested at least 10,000 enemy soldiers had dug in among the rocky formations, supported by heavy artillery and energy shields. The coalition's plan was methodical and precise, a coordinated assault using overwhelming firepower to break through their defenses. The transport bay doors hissed open, revealing a vast staging area where various coalition forces prepared for battle. Zektar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction as he observed the familiar sight of professional military organization. Kalani shock troops checked their plasma rifles while maintaining perfect formation. The insectoid Thrix adjusted their exoskeleton armor with mechanical precision. Even the massive Gorvani war beasts stood in orderly rows, their handlers ensuring every piece of equipment was secure. Then Zektar noticed the humans, a group of roughly 200 soldiers clustered around several small vehicles, but their behavior seemed entirely wrong. Instead of maintaining rigid military discipline, they appeared to be engaged in casual conversation. Some were laughing. Others were consuming what appeared to be recreational stimulants, and a few were even playing some kind of competitive game involving throwing metal discs. Their equipment looked cobbled together from various sources, and their uniforms lacked the standardized appearance he expected from professional soldiers. "First time seeing humans in action?" asked a familiar voice. Zektar turned to see Captain Velthara, a fellow Kalani officer who had served with distinction in the Outer Rim campaigns. Her blue-scaled skin bore the ritual scars of a veteran warrior. "Indeed," Zektar replied, his translator converting his clicking speech patterns into standard coalition dialect. "Are they always so undisciplined?" Velthara's eyes gleamed with what might have been amusement. "That's what I thought too, until I fought alongside them during the Proxima Station incident. Trust me, appearances can be deceiving." Before Zektar could respond, a human approached their position. The male stood roughly average height for his species, with pale skin and short brown hair. Most remarkably, he seemed completely relaxed despite the impending battle, wearing what appeared to be a genuine smile. "Commander Zektar, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Chen, commanding the human contingent. Looking forward to working with you today." The human extended his hand in what Zektar recognized as their species' greeting ritual. Zektar carefully grasped the offered appendage, surprised by the firm grip and steady eye contact. "The honor is mine, Colonel Chen. I admit I am curious about your tactical approach." Chen's smile widened. "Well, we've studied the terrain and enemy positions extensively. Our plan is pretty straightforward. We're going to hit them where they least expect it with maximum chaos and minimum predictability. Should be fun." The word fun puzzled Zektar. In his experience, warfare was a serious matter requiring careful planning and disciplined execution. The concept of finding enjoyment in combat seemed alien, even by coalition standards. "Could you elaborate on your strategic methodology?" "Sure thing. See, most species approach warfare like a chess match. Lots of planning, careful moves, thinking several steps ahead. Humans learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy is to flip the board over and start throwing pieces." Chen chuckled at his own analogy. "We specialize in adaptive chaos. When things go wrong, and they always go wrong, we improvise." The mission briefing began moments later, delivered by General Krextel of the dominant Altarian species. The holographic display showed detailed topographical maps and enemy positions, while the general outlined the coalition's 3-pronged assault plan. Each species had been assigned specific objectives based on their particular strengths and capabilities. As expected, the Kalani forces would serve as the primary assault unit, using their superior speed and plasma weaponry to break through the main defensive lines. The Thrix would provide technical support, jamming enemy communications and disabling their electronic systems. The Gorvani would follow behind as heavy support, their massive frames capable of absorbing tremendous damage while delivering devastating firepower. The humans, according to the general's plan, would serve as a diversionary force, drawing enemy attention away from the main assault. It seemed like a role suited to their apparently chaotic nature, though Zektar wondered if they possessed sufficient discipline to execute even a simple diversion. Questions? General Krextul inquired, his deep voice carrying the authority of centuries of military command. Colonel Chen raised his hand. Just one, General. What's our rules of engagement regarding collateral damage to the canyon structure itself? The question struck Zektar as odd. The canyon was just rock formation. Why would humans be concerned about damaging terrain? Minimal concern, the general replied. The mining operation can work around any geological damage. Why do you ask? Chen's smile took on a different quality, one that made something deep in Zektar's primitive brain trigger an ancient warning. Just checking our options, sir. We'll adapt accordingly. As the briefing concluded and forces began moving toward their deployment positions, Zektar found himself walking alongside the human column. Their casual demeanor remained unchanged, but he noticed subtle details that suggested these mammals were more professional than they appeared. Their weapons were meticulously maintained despite their makeshift appearance. Their movements, while relaxed, demonstrated excellent situational awareness. Most importantly, their eyes held the steady confidence of experienced warriors. Commander Zektar, called one of the human soldiers, a young female with auburn hair. First time fighting with humans? Yes, it is, he admitted. Well, stick close and keep your eyes open. Today's going to be educational. As they approached the canyon's edge and prepared for combat deployment, Zektar reflected on the strange confidence these humans displayed. Every species he had fought alongside approached warfare with grim determination, professional focus, or ritualistic honor. Humans seemed to approach it as if they were about to attend some kind of entertainment event. The enemy positions came into view, massive fortifications carved into the canyon walls, bristling with energy weapons and protected by overlapping shield generators. 10,000 Vorthak warriors waited in prepared defensive positions, ready to repel any assault. It was exactly the kind of scenario that required careful planning and overwhelming force to overcome. Zektar checked his equipment one final time and prepared to witness how these strange mammals would handle their first major coalition engagement. Whatever happened next, he suspected it would be unlike anything he had experienced in his long military career. The attack began exactly as planned, with Kalani forces advancing in perfect formation toward the canyon's main defensive positions. Zektar led his squad through the predetermined approach route, their plasma rifles charged and ready. The familiar rhythm of coordinated military assault felt comfortable and professional until the humans completely ignored their assigned diversionary objective. Instead of creating a simple distraction as ordered, Colonel Chen's forces had somehow positioned themselves on the canyon's opposite rim, nearly 2 kilometers from their designated area. Zektar watched in confusion as human soldiers began rappelling down the sheer cliff face using improvised climbing equipment. This wasn't just a deviation from the plan, it was tactical insanity. Command, this is Zektar. Human forces appear to be out of position, he reported through his comm system. General Krextul's response crackled with irritation. Confirmed. Colonel Chen, explain your unit's current position immediately. Just getting creative, General, came Chen's voice, remarkably calm despite the sound of energy weapons firing in the background. We found a better approach route. Beginning Phase 1 now. Before anyone could demand clarification, explosions began echoing from deep within the canyon. Not the controlled demolitions typical of military engineering, but chaotic, seemingly random detonations that sent massive chunks of rock cascading down the cliff faces. The Vorthak defensive positions, which had been oriented toward the expected coalition assault routes, suddenly found themselves under attack from an impossible direction. Zektar's tactical display showed complete chaos. Human life signs were scattered throughout the canyon in patterns that made no strategic sense. Some appeared to be climbing up the interior walls. Others were moving through what should have been impassable terrain, and several groups seemed to be advancing directly toward the heaviest enemy concentrations, with no regard for tactical superiority or cover. How are they even surviving down there? Felthara asked, her own squad having taken position beside Zektar's forces. The original assault plan called for a careful advance under covering fire, but the human actions had completely disrupted enemy positioning. The answer became apparent as Zektar observed the battlefield through his enhanced optics. The humans weren't just surviving the enemy response, they were thriving in it. Individual soldiers moved through the combat zone with a fluid adaptability that seemed to defy military logic. When their planned routes were blocked, they immediately found alternatives. When their equipment failed, they improvised replacements using battlefield debris. When they encountered unexpected enemy positions, they attacked from directions the Vorthak couldn't have anticipated. One human soldier, separated from his unit and surrounded by 3 Vorthak warriors, somehow managed to turn his position into an advantage. Instead of seeking cover or calling for support, he used a damaged energy pack to create an improvised explosive, simultaneously eliminating his attackers and creating a breach in the enemy's defensive line. The action was so unexpected that nearby Vorthak forces abandoned their positions to respond, leaving their assigned sectors vulnerable. All units, advance immediately, General Krextel ordered, recognizing the opportunity the humans had created. Exploit the breaches in their defensive perimeter. Zektar led his squad forward, but found the battlefield had transformed into something unrecognizable. The carefully mapped enemy positions were now in complete disarray. Vorthak commanders were struggling to coordinate responses to human attacks that seemed to come from every direction simultaneously. Defensive systems designed to repel conventional assaults were proving useless against enemies who refused to follow conventional patterns. His squad approached what should have been a heavily fortified checkpoint. Zektar discovered it had been abandoned. Scorch marks and improvised explosive damage suggested the humans had somehow eliminated the position's defenders, but the method was impossible to determine. No coalition force had been assigned to this sector, yet human influence was unmistakable. Commander Zektar, this is Chen. We've got a situation developing near grid reference 77 Alpha. Could use some backup if you're in the neighborhood. Zektar checked his position. Grid 77 Alpha was supposed to be deep behind enemy lines, in an area no coalition forces should have been able to reach for several hours. Colonel Chen, how did you reach that position? Our intelligence indicated heavy fortifications throughout that sector. Yeah, about that intelligence. Turns out it was partially wrong. The fortifications were there, but they were facing the wrong direction. We came up through the drainage tunnels underneath. The casual tone in Chen's voice was disturbing. He spoke as if infiltrating enemy positions through unmapped underground passages was a routine tactical decision, rather than an act of desperate improvisation. More concerning was the implication that humans had somehow acquired detailed knowledge of the canyon's subterranean structure, without access to coalition geological surveys. Zektar redirected his squad toward the human position, navigating through terrain that should have been controlled by enemy forces. Instead, he found evidence of recent combat everywhere: disabled Vorthak equipment, abandoned defensive positions, and blast patterns suggesting close quarters fighting. The humans had somehow carved a path through prepared enemy defenses, using methods that left their opponents unable to mount effective resistance. When they reached Grid 77 Alpha, Zektar found Colonel Chen's forces engaged in what appeared to be a completely improvised siege of a Vorthak command bunker. Rather than surrounding the position and calling for heavy artillery support, human soldiers were systematically dismantling the structure using a combination of standard coalition explosives and locally acquired materials. Glad you could make it, Chen said, greeting Zektar as if they had arranged a casual social meeting rather than a tactical battlefield coordination. We've got most of their command structure pinned down in that bunker, but they're using some kind of shield generator we haven't seen before. Any ideas? Zektar studied the enemy position through his optics. The bunker was indeed protected by an advanced energy shield, likely powered by an underground fusion reactor. Standard coalition procedure would require specialized equipment and careful planning to overcome such defenses. This type of shielding typically requires coordinated artillery bombardment, followed by engineering teams with specific countermeasures. "We should call for support." "Or," said a human sergeant, pointing to a seemingly insignificant drainage pipe protruding from the bunker's lower section, "we could go with option B." Before Zektar could ask what option B entailed, he watched 3 human soldiers disappear into the drainage system, carrying what appeared to be improvised explosive devices. The concept of entering enemy fortifications through waste disposal systems had never appeared in any coalition tactical manual. Yet these mammals seemed to consider it a reasonable approach. The shield generator shut down 6 minutes later, followed by several internal explosions that suggested the humans had somehow accessed the bunker's power systems. Vorthak forces began evacuating the position, only to find human soldiers waiting at every exit route. The enemy command structure that should have coordinated defensive operations for the entire canyon was eliminated in less than 10 minutes. "Command, this is Chen. Enemy command post is neutralized. We're moving to Phase 2. "Phase 2? General Krextol's voice carried a note of concern. "Colonel, your original mission was diversionary action only. There was no Phase 2 in your assignment." "Right, well, we're kind of making this up as we go. The situation's developed some interesting opportunities we'd hate to waste. Don't worry, though, we've got it handled." Zektar realized that the humans weren't just deviating from the battle plan, they were rewriting it in real time based on battlefield conditions. Every coalition species he knew approached warfare as a carefully orchestrated process, requiring extensive preparation and coordination. Humans seemed to treat it as an ongoing improvisation, where initial plans were merely starting suggestions. The most disturbing aspect wasn't their tactical flexibility, but their apparent comfort with complete uncertainty. Other coalition forces functioned best when they understood their mission parameters and operational boundaries. Humans appeared to function best when they had no idea what would happen next. As explosions continued echoing through the canyon and human forces advanced toward objectives that hadn't existed when the mission began, Zektar began to understand that he was witnessing something unprecedented in coalition military history. These mammals weren't just effective soldiers. They were introducing an entirely new form of warfare, based on principles that challenged everything he thought he knew about tactical combat. The battlefield had transformed into something beyond Zektar's understanding. What began as a conventional assault against prepared defensive positions had devolved into absolute chaos, with human forces somehow turning that chaos into a tactical advantage. Enemy communications were being jammed not by sophisticated Thrix technology, but by humans who had apparently learned to mimic Vorthak signal protocols and were broadcasting false orders throughout their command network. "Commander, we've got a problem," reported Sergeant Velnix, one of Zektar's most experienced soldiers. "The humans have somehow gained access to the enemy's primary supply depot. They're not just destroying it, they're redistributing the contents." Zektar checked his tactical display, confirming that human life signs were indeed clustered around what intelligence had identified as a heavily fortified Vorthak logistics center. The position should have been impossible to reach without massive casualties, yet somehow the humans had not only infiltrated it, but were apparently conducting some kind of inventory operation. "Colonel Chen, please explain your current activities," General Krextol demanded over the comm system, his voice carrying the strain of a commander whose carefully planned operation had been completely overturned. "Resource reallocation, General," Chen replied with characteristic casualness. "Turns out the Vorthak have been stockpiling some interesting equipment down here. We're making sure it gets put to better use." What followed was a series of explosions that seemed to follow no logical pattern. Instead of the systematic destruction typical of military demolition, the blast occurred at seemingly random intervals and locations throughout the canyon. Only when Zektar observed the aftermath did he realize the humans had been selectively targeting specific structural points to create a cascading avalanche effect. Massive sections of the canyon wall began collapsing, but rather than indiscriminate destruction, the rock slides were channeled to block specific Vorthak escape routes while leaving coalition advance paths clear. The humans had somehow calculated precise demolition points to reshape the entire battlefield's geography in real time. How did they know which supports to target? Felthara asked, watching as another controlled avalanche sealed off a secondary Vorthak position. We don't have geological engineers capable of that kind of calculation. The answer came from an unexpected source, one of the human soldiers who had been monitoring coalition communications. Actually, we do. Private Rodriguez has a geology degree from Colorado School of Mines. Figured we might as well put his education to good use. Zektar stared at the young human soldier, barely past adolescence by his species' standards. You performed geological engineering calculations during active combat? Well, it's not like I had anything else to do while we were waiting for the enemy to figure out where we were, Rodriguez replied with a grin. Plus, my thesis was on sedimentary rock stability in low-gravity environments. This stuff is basically homework with explosives. The casual attitude these humans displayed toward technical expertise was unprecedented. Coalition forces typically relied on specialized units with years of training for complex engineering tasks. Humans seemed to possess individuals with diverse knowledge bases who could apply advanced technical skills as battlefield conditions required. More concerning was their apparent comfort with making irreversible decisions based on incomplete information. The geological modifications they were implementing would permanently alter the canyon structure. Yet they showed no hesitation about committing to actions with long-term consequences. Commander Zektar, we're picking up some unusual Vorthak transmissions, reported the Thrix communication specialist assigned to their sector. They appear to be requesting emergency evacuation support from their orbital assets. This development should have been encouraging. Enemy forces calling for retreat typically indicated tactical success. However, Zektar noticed that human forces were not pursuing fleeing Vorthak units in the expected manner. Instead, they appeared to be herding enemy troops toward specific locations while maintaining pursuit pressure that prevented organized withdrawal. Colonel Chen, enemy forces appear to be retreating. Are your units prepared to accept their surrender? Surrender? Chen's voice carried genuine surprise. Oh, they're not retreating. They're just moving to where we need them to be for the final phase. Before Zektar could request clarification, a new series of explosions erupted throughout the canyon. However, these blasts were different from the previous demolitions. Instead of structural collapse, they created massive clouds of dust and debris that obscured visibility across the entire battlefield. Within moments, the tactical situation became completely unclear as sensor systems struggled to penetrate the artificial dust storm. All units, maintain position, General Krextel ordered. Wait for visibility to clear before advancing. Negative on that, General, Chen responded. We're going mobile. All human units execute final phase now. What happened next challenged everything Zektar understood about military operations. In the midst of zero visibility conditions, human forces began moving with apparent coordination throughout the canyon. Their life signs appeared on tactical displays in patterns that suggested they were executing a complex maneuver, despite having no way to see their targets or communicate with each other through the electromagnetic interference created by the explosions. Coalition forces waited for the dust to clear, following standard protocol for reduced visibility situations. When sensor clarity returned, they discovered that the entire tactical situation had been resolved. Vorthak forces throughout the canyon had been neutralized or captured. Their equipment had been systematically disabled, and their fortified positions had been occupied by human soldiers who seemed to have appeared from nowhere. How? Was all Zektar could manage to say. Echolocation, explained Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, one of the human squad leaders. Humans can't naturally echolocate like some species, but we can learn to navigate by sound when necessary. Plus, we've been mapping this canyon for the past hour using audio signatures from our explosions. Once we knew the acoustic layout, operating in zero visibility was just a matter of trusting our ears. The concept that humans could learn sensory techniques from other species and apply them in combat situations was staggering. Most coalition races possessed specific biological advantages that determined their tactical roles. Humans seemed capable of adapting abilities from multiple species as circumstances required. Also, added Private Chen, apparently related to the colonel, we've been using combat hand signals modified for dust cloud operations, kind of like underwater diving communication, but adapted for ground-based combat with limited visibility. Zektar realized he was witnessing something that went beyond superior tactics or advanced technology. Humans possessed an ability to synthesize knowledge from multiple sources and apply it creatively under pressure. They could take techniques from geology, biology, underwater operations, and acoustic engineering, then combine them into effective battlefield solutions in real time. More significantly, they seemed to thrive in situations where conventional military doctrine provided no guidance. Instead of being paralyzed by unexpected circumstances, they used uncertainty as an opportunity to implement unconventional approaches that their enemies couldn't anticipate or counter. As coalition forces advanced through the canyon to secure the area, they found evidence of human innovation everywhere: improvised equipment combinations, creative uses of captured enemy resources, and tactical solutions that demonstrated thinking patterns unlike anything in coalition military history. General Krextol, this is Colonel Chen. Canyon is secure. Enemy forces neutralized with minimal coalition casualties. We're ready for extraction whenever you... NASA, the mission that should have required hours of careful assault with significant losses had been completed in approximately 90 minutes with casualties so low they barely registered on the tactical summary. More importantly, the humans had accomplished this while completely rewriting the operational parameters in ways that left their enemies unable to mount effective resistance. As Zektar prepared to leave the battlefield, he realized that his understanding of warfare had been fundamentally challenged. He had witnessed tactics that shouldn't have worked, strategies that violated basic military principles, and soldiers who treated impossible situations as interesting puzzles to be solved, rather than obstacles to be overcome. During the extraction phase, Zektar observed human soldiers conducting activities that defied standard post-battle protocols. While coalition forces performed routine equipment checks and casualty assessments, humans were dismantling captured Vorthak technology with an efficiency that suggested they understood enemy engineering principles better than the manufacturers themselves. Private Williams, "What exactly are you doing with that enemy communications array?" Zektar asked, watching a human soldier methodically disassemble sophisticated alien technology using improvised tools. "Reverse engineering, sir," Williams replied, without looking up from his work. "This model uses quantum encryption algorithms we haven't seen before. If we can figure out how it works, we can probably adapt the technology for coalition use, or at least develop better countermeasures against it." The casual statement revealed another disturbing aspect of human capabilities. Most coalition species required specialized research facilities and teams of experts to analyze captured alien technology. Humans seemed capable of performing advanced technical analysis using battlefield conditions and basic equipment. "How did you learn Vorthak engineering principles?" Zektar pressed. "Trial and error mostly," Williams admitted. "Plus, Dr. Kim back at base has been studying their equipment from previous encounters. She uploaded some reference files to our tactical computers before the mission. It's amazing how much you can learn when you're not afraid to break things while you're figuring them out." The willingness to destroy valuable captured equipment in pursuit of understanding was another uniquely human characteristic. Other coalition species preserved captured technology for careful study by qualified experts. Humans seemed to believe that knowledge gained through destructive experimentation was more valuable than intact samples. Colonel Chen approached their position, carrying what appeared to be a modified Vorthak energy weapon. "Commander Zektar, mind if I ask you something about coalition tactical doctrine?" "Certainly, Colonel." "In situations like this where you've achieved complete tactical victory with minimal losses, what's the standard follow-up procedure?" The question seemed odd to Zektar. Standard procedure involves securing the area, extracting all personnel and captured materials, and conducting detailed mission analysis for future reference. "Why do you ask?" Chen's expression suggested he was considering something that wouldn't appear in any military manual. "See, we've been thinking about the broader strategic situation. The Vorthak chose this location for a reason. It controls access to 3 major shipping routes and the mineral extraction operations. Taking it away from them is good, but it doesn't address the root problem, which is, they're going to try to take it back, probably with a bigger force next time, since they know coalition forces can overcome their standard defensive configurations. So we've got a choice. We can leave and let them refortify, or we can make sure they can't use this location again." The implications of Chen's statement were staggering. He was suggesting permanent strategic alteration rather than simple tactical victory. Colonel, such decisions would require authorization from the Coalition High Command. Individual unit commanders don't have authority to implement permanent territorial modifications. Right, that's what we figured you'd say, Chen replied with a grin. That's why we've already implemented some preemptive measures. Consider them insurance policies against future enemy occupation. Before Zektar could ask what measures they were referring to, a series of precisely timed explosions echoed through the canyon. However, these blasts were different from the tactical demolitions used during the battle. They seemed designed to alter the canyon's strategic value, rather than its immediate tactical configuration. What have you done? General Krextul demanded over the comm system, his voice carrying a tone that Zektar had never heard from the veteran commander. Creative landscaping, General, Chen replied. We've sealed the main shipping passages and redirected the underground water systems to flood the mineral extraction areas. The canyon is still habitable, but it's no longer strategically valuable to anyone. Problem solved. The audacity of taking unilateral action to permanently alter a contested strategic location without authorization was beyond anything in coalition military experience. Yet as Zektar studied the tactical display showing the geological modifications, he had to admit the solution was elegant in its simplicity. If the territory held no strategic value, there would be no reason for future conflicts over its control. Colonel Chen, you have exceeded your operational authority by several orders of magnitude, General Krextul stated formally. These actions will require extensive review by Coalition Command. Understood, General. We'll be happy to explain our reasoning during the debrief. In the meantime, shall we proceed with extraction? The casual acceptance of potential disciplinary consequences was another uniquely human characteristic. Other coalition species would be deeply concerned about violating operational protocols. Humans seem to evaluate their actions based on practical effectiveness rather than procedural compliance. As transport ships arrived to extract coalition forces, Zektar noticed that human soldiers were loading significantly more equipment than they had brought to the mission. Investigation revealed they had somehow salvaged, modified, and integrated captured Vorthak technology into their standard equipment loadout during the brief post-battle period. Is that authorized? Felthara asked, observing humans loading modified alien weapons onto their transport. Probably not, admitted Sergeant Murphy, one of the human squad leaders, but it seems wasteful to leave perfectly good equipment behind when it might be useful for future operations. Besides, we've improved most of this stuff. The original Vorthak designs had some serious efficiency flaws. The claim that humans had improved alien technology during a battlefield salvage operation was extraordinary. When Zektar examined one of the modified weapons, he discovered they had indeed enhanced its power output and energy efficiency, using components cannibalized from other captured devices. More remarkably, they had documented their modifications and were prepared to share the improvements with other coalition forces. Why are you sharing these technical modifications? Zektar asked. Most species would consider enhanced weapons technology to be proprietary military advantages. Because we're all on the same side, replied Lieutenant Rodriguez, the geology expert who had calculated the canyon demolitions. The stronger everyone's equipment is, the safer all of us are in future engagements. Besides, someone else might think of even better improvements we haven't considered. The collaborative approach to military technology development was unprecedented in coalition history. Most species guarded their tactical advantages carefully to maintain their competitive position within the alliance. Humans seem to view collective improvement as more valuable than individual superiority. During the flight back to base, Zektar reflected on everything he had witnessed. The humans had demonstrated tactical flexibility, technical innovation, strategic initiative, and collaborative methodology that challenged fundamental assumptions about military operations. They had achieved complete victory against a numerically superior enemy, while simultaneously implementing long-term solutions to prevent future conflicts. Most disturbing was their apparent comfort with operating beyond the boundaries of established protocols when they believed circumstances warranted unconventional approaches. They didn't seem to view military regulations as absolute constraints, but rather as guidelines that could be modified based on situational requirements. Commander Zektar, Colonel Chen said, settling into the seat beside him on the transport. Mind if I ask what you thought of our operational methods? Honestly, Colonel, they terrify me. Chen's eyebrows rose. Terrify you? Why? Because they work. Everything you did today violated standard military doctrine, exceeded operational authority, and disregarded established protocols. Yet you achieved better results than any conventional approach could have produced. That suggests either our entire understanding of warfare is fundamentally flawed, or humans possess capabilities that make conventional rules irrelevant. Chen considered this for a moment. Maybe it's not about the rules being wrong. Maybe it's about knowing when the situation requires writing new ones. As their transport approached Coalition headquarters, Zektar realized that his fears weren't really about human tactical methods or technological capabilities. What truly concerned him was the possibility that these mammals possessed something far more dangerous than superior weapons or innovative strategies. They possessed the ability to reimagine the fundamental nature of any challenge they encountered, then implement solutions that their opponents couldn't predict, understand, or counter. The debriefing session 3 days later revealed just how fundamentally humans had changed Coalition understanding of the Vorthak threat. Intelligence analysts had discovered that the canyon operation was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger enemy strategy to control critical shipping routes throughout the sector. What should have been a minor tactical victory had apparently disrupted a major strategic campaign. The modifications you implemented have forced the Vorthak to completely revise their expansion plans, reported Chief Intelligence Officer Kexvar, her multiple appendages manipulating holographic displays, showing regional tactical data. By removing the strategic value of Kepler 442b, you've created a gap in their logistics network that will require months to resolve. General Krextool studied the strategic implications with obvious satisfaction. Excellent work, Colonel Chen. Although your methods were unconventional, the results exceed our most optimistic projections. Actually, General, Chen replied with characteristic modesty, we think there might be even bigger opportunities if we approach this systematically. The statement sent a chill through Zektar's thoracic cavity. If humans considered the canyon operation to be preliminary rather than conclusive, what exactly were they planning next? Chen activated his own tactical display, showing a comprehensive analysis of Vorthak territorial expansion patterns across multiple star systems. See? The thing about taking away one strategic location is that it forces your enemy to concentrate resources elsewhere. They're predictable that way. They'll reinforce their remaining positions to compensate for what they've lost. That's standard military doctrine, agreed General Krextool. Losing strategic assets forces tactical concentration. Right. But what if instead of attacking their reinforced positions, we continue eliminating the strategic value of territories they want to control? We could essentially make entire regions worthless to them without engaging their military forces directly. The concept was so radical that several coalition officers began speaking simultaneously, their voices creating a cacophony of confusion in the briefing room. Zektar found himself struggling to comprehend the implications. Traditional warfare focused on controlling territory by defeating enemy forces. Humans were suggesting they could achieve strategic victory by making the territory itself irrelevant. Colonel, interrupted Admiral Thexnall, the Coalition's senior strategic officer, what you're proposing would require resources and coordination, far beyond what any single military operation could provide. The engineering requirements alone would be astronomical. Chen smiled with the same unsettling confidence he had displayed before the canyon assault. Actually, we've been running some preliminary calculations. Dr. Kim's analysis suggests we could implement environmental modifications using primarily local resources and captured enemy equipment. The Vorthak have been kind enough to position exactly the materials we'd need in most of their target locations. You want to use their own supplies against them? Asked Captain Velthara, her scales displaying the color patterns associated with incredulity. Why not? They've spent considerable effort establishing supply depots and infrastructure throughout the regions they want to control. We could repurpose their investments to support our objectives instead of theirs. It's efficient. The casual Wei Chen discussed appropriating enemy resources for large-scale strategic operations, demonstrated another aspect of human thinking that distinguished them from other coalition species. Where most military commanders saw enemy assets as targets to be destroyed, humans apparently saw them as resources to be redistributed. This approach would require unprecedented coordination between multiple coalition species, General Krextol pointed out. Each operation would need geological specialists, engineering teams, tactical forces, and extensive logistical support. That's the beautiful part, Chen replied, his enthusiasm growing as he outlined his vision. Humans aren't the only species with useful specialized knowledge. Every coalition member has capabilities that could contribute to this kind of strategic approach. We just need to start thinking about warfare as a collaborative engineering project instead of a series of isolated military actions. Zektar realized that humans weren't just proposing tactical innovations, they were suggesting a fundamental reorganization of how the coalition approached military challenges. Instead of species-specific operations with limited interaction, they envisioned integrated campaigns that leveraged the unique capabilities of all alliance members. The Thrix could handle electronic warfare and communications disruption. Chen continued, gesturing toward the insectoid representatives. Kalani forces could provide rapid response and precision operations. Gorvani could supply heavy engineering and construction capabilities. Humans could coordinate adaptive strategies and improvised solutions. Together, we could implement campaigns that no single species could achieve individually. The idea that humans saw themselves as coordinators rather than primary combatants was revealing. They apparently viewed their role as synthesizing the capabilities of other species into more effective combined operations, rather than demonstrating their own superiority. What about the Vorthak response? Asked Chief Intelligence Officer Kexvar. They won't passively allow us to systematically eliminate their strategic objectives. That's where things get interesting, Chen replied. See, conventional military response requires them to choose between defending existing positions and attacking new targets. But if we're not trying to hold territory, just modify it, they can't use standard defensive strategies against us. Admiral Thexnal's multiple eyes focused intently on the human colonel. Explain. Traditional military doctrine assumes both sides want to control the same resources. When one side stops caring about control and focuses on denial, the strategic equation changes completely. They'll have to develop entirely new tactical approaches to counter operations designed to remove rather than capture strategic value. The implications were staggering. If humans could convince the coalition to adopt this approach, it would force the Vorthak to fundamentally reorganize their entire military strategy. Their existing advantages in numbers and defensive positioning would become irrelevant if coalition forces stopped trying to capture and hold territory. Colonel Chen, General Krextol said slowly, are you suggesting that humans have developed a form of warfare that makes conventional military doctrine obsolete? Not obsolete, Chen corrected. Just incomplete. Traditional approaches work. Great when both sides are playing the same game by the same rules, but there's no law requiring us to play the game our enemies expect. Dr. Yilrex, the coalition's chief military theorist, had remained silent throughout the discussion. Now she activated her own display, showing historical analyses of various conflict scenarios. The theoretical framework Colonel Chen describes has precedence in pre-spaceflight warfare among several species, including humans. However, implementing such strategies on an interstellar scale would present logistical challenges that have never been successfully resolved. Which is why we'd like to propose a test case, Chen said. There's a Vorthak staging area in the Proxima Centauri system that fits the profile perfectly. Multiple strategic assets, significant enemy investment, and geographical characteristics that would allow us to demonstrate the effectiveness of coordinated denial operations. The casual way Chen proposed attacking one of the Vorthak Empire's major military installations suggested that humans viewed the difference between small-scale tactical operations and large-scale strategic campaigns as merely a matter of scale rather than fundamental complexity. You're talking about a major military undertaking, Admiral Thexnal pointed out. Such an operation would require approval from the Coalition High Council and coordination with multiple fleet commands. Absolutely, Chen agreed. We're not suggesting this as a unilateral human operation. We want to demonstrate how effective coalition forces can be when every species contributes their specialized capabilities toward a unified objective. As the briefing concluded, and various officers dispersed to consider the human proposals, Zektar found himself both fascinated and deeply concerned. The humans had demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded anything in coalition military history, but their true innovation lay in their ability to reconceptualize the fundamental nature of warfare itself. They didn't just fight differently. They thought differently about what fighting was supposed to accomplish, and if their approach proved successful on a larger scale, it would change not just how the coalition fought wars, but how every species in the galaxy understood military conflict. 6 months later, Zektar stood on the observation deck of the coalition flagship watching the final phase of Operation Distributed Denial, the human-designed campaign that had systematically eliminated Vorthak's strategic capabilities across 7 star systems without engaging in a single traditional battle. The results had exceeded every projection and fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. The Proxima Centauri operation had been the first test case, and its success had convinced even the most skeptical coalition leaders to embrace human strategic thinking. Instead of attacking Vorthak military installations, coalition forces had rendered them irrelevant by redirecting asteroid fields to block shipping lanes, introducing nanoscale engineering bacteria that consumed specific metal alloys used in their weapons, and establishing gravitational anomalies that made their staging areas unsuitable for large-scale operations. "Final report, Commander?" requested Admiral Thexnall, her attention focused on the tactical displays showing the last Vorthak evacuation transports leaving the system. "All strategic objectives have been neutralized," Zektar reported. "Enemy forces are withdrawing to positions beyond our operational zone. No significant coalition casualties reported across any operational theater." The statistics were unprecedented in coalition military history. 7 major enemy-held systems had been effectively conquered without losing a single strategic engagement, because they had never fought any strategic engagements. Instead, they had simply made it impossible for the Vorthak to achieve their objectives in those locations. "Incoming transmission from Colonel Chen," announced the communications. Officer Chen's image appeared on the main screen. His usual casual demeanor somehow more pronounced now that his theories had proven successful on an interstellar scale. "Admiral, we've completed the environmental modifications in the outer system. The Vorthak won't be able to use these shipping routes for approximately 50 years, even if they develop completely new propulsion technology." "Excellent work, Colonel. What's the status of your engineering teams?" "Already moving to the next system. Dr. Rodriguez thinks we can complete the geological modifications there in about half the time, since we won't need to work around existing enemy fortifications. Turns out it's much easier to modify terrain when nobody's shooting at you." The casual tone Chen used to discuss operations that had reshaped entire star systems still amazed Zektar. Humans seemed to view planetary engineering as a routine technical challenge, rather than an extraordinary achievement requiring unprecedented coordination and resources. "Any word from the Vorthak High Command?" Admiral Thexnall asked. "Actually, yes. We received a formal diplomatic communication this morning. They're requesting negotiations for what they're calling a territorial usage agreement. Apparently, they want to discuss establishing shipping rights through systems we've modified." The implications were staggering. Instead of responding with military escalation, the Vorthak Empire was attempting to negotiate economic arrangements with the coalition. Humans had somehow transformed a military conflict into a diplomatic opportunity by making war itself economically unviable. "They're offering to pay us for access to shipping routes through territory they used to control." Chen continued with obvious amusement. "It seems they've decided that cooperation might be more cost-effective than attempting to recapture strategically worthless systems." Admiral Thexnall's multiple eyes displayed the complex patterns associated with deep contemplation. "Are you suggesting that human strategic methods have ended the war without achieving military victory?" "Not ended," Chen corrected. "Redefined. Instead of fighting over who controls resources, we've created a situation where everyone benefits more from cooperation than from conflict. The Vorthak can still achieve their economic objectives, but only by working with us rather than against us." The transformation of an existential military threat into a potential economic partnership was beyond anything in coalition diplomatic history. Humans had somehow identified underlying objectives that both sides could achieve through collaboration, rather than confrontation. "There's one more thing," Chen added, his expression becoming more serious. "We've been analyzing the broader strategic situation, and we think this approach could work with other threats the coalition is facing. The key is identifying what your enemies actually want versus what they think they need to do to get it." Zektar realized that humans hadn't just developed innovative military tactics, they had fundamentally reimagined the purpose of warfare itself. Instead of viewing conflict as a zero-sum competition for resources, they treated it as a problem-solving exercise where the optimal solution might benefit everyone involved. "What are you proposing, Colonel?" Admiral Thexnell asked. "A new kind of military doctrine based on strategic Aikido, using your opponent's strength and momentum to achieve outcomes that serve everyone's interests. Instead of defeating enemies, we redirect their efforts toward mutually beneficial objectives." The concept challenged everything Zektar thought he understood about interspecies conflict. Traditional military theory assumed that different species had incompatible interests that required resolution through superior force. Humans suggested that apparent conflicts often masked underlying compatibility that could be revealed through creative problem-solving. "Coalition Science Council has, analyzed human strategic methodologies," reported Dr. Yilrex, joining the conversation from her research station. "Their approach appears to be based on what they call systems thinking, analyzing complex situations as interconnected networks rather than isolated competitive relationships." "That's about right," Chen confirmed. "Most conflicts happen because different groups are optimizing for different variables without considering how their objectives might actually be complementary. If you can identify shared interests and design solutions that serve everyone's real needs, military force becomes unnecessary." As the meeting concluded and coalition forces began transitioning from military operations to diplomatic coordination, Zektar reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. 6 months ago, humans had been unknown newcomers, whose casual attitude toward military protocol had seemed unprofessional and potentially dangerous. Now they had demonstrated capabilities that transcended conventional military success. They had shown that warfare itself was merely one possible approach to resolving interspecies disputes, and often not the most effective one. Their ability to reconceptualize fundamental assumptions about conflict and cooperation had changed not just how the coalition approached military challenges, but how they understood the nature of interspecies relationships. "Commander Zektar," Colonel Chen said, approaching as the meeting dispersed, "I wanted to thank you for keeping an open mind during our first operation together. I know our methods must have seemed pretty chaotic." "They were chaotic, Colonel." "That was precisely what made them effective," Chen smiled. "Well, if you thought that was interesting, wait until you see what we're planning for the Andromeda situation. Dr. Kim thinks we might be able to resolve that dispute using gravitational engineering and some really creative applications of quantum mechanics." As Chen walked away to coordinate the next impossible-sounding operation, Zektar realized that his initial fear had been entirely justified. Humans were indeed terrifying, not because of their weapons or tactics, but because of their ability to imagine solutions that no one else would even recognize as possibilities. They had taught the galaxy that the most dangerous weapon wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology, but the capacity to think beyond the limitations that everyone else accepted as unchangeable reality. And now that they had demonstrated what was possible, when you refused to accept conventional wisdom about what was impossible, there was no telling what they might accomplish next. The war with the Vorthak was over, but Zektar suspected that the age of human influence on galactic civilization was just beginning.